It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, and Quark's got a rodent problem. Those space voles from a few seasons back are proving as hard to eradicate as their reputation suggested, something that means Quark's bar is going to be closed for a while. It's just the latest setback in his thoroughly awful life, and learning that Rom, the underappreciated brother, is now getting married to Lita just makes things worse. It's so bad that Quark even listens to Rom's suggestion of taking some time away from it all by visiting their mother, Ishka, back on FERENGI. Perhaps that was so Quark doesn't pass judgment about Rom learning Bajoran customs for Lita. O'Brien and Dax are very supportive of him though, and in so doing, accidentally give him a massive complex about not being a normal Ferengi. Back on FERENGI, Quark's pouring out all of his woes to his mum, the chief of them being his FCA ban. That's the ban which means he's not allowed to associate with any other Ferengi, and coincidentally came with seizing the assets of his entire family, so Ishka should be out on the streets, but let's ignore that for now. Perhaps it's because she's got friends in high places, or in wardrobes for that matter, as that's where Quark finds Grand Nagus Zek and his assistant. Once Quark's got over the initial shock and instinctive flight response, his mum calls Zek out and starts to explain things. She and Zek met at a Cardi spin cash tournament. Well, sort of. The women had to play in the basement, obviously, but when she heard the Grand Nagus himself was having a little trouble, she sent a message with some pointers on, and he ended up winning the tournament as a result. A thank you message became regular correspondence and an eventual meeting. Learning that he'd been talking to a female all along was a bit of a shock, but Zek didn't become Grand Nagus by ignoring an opportunity, and they've been an item ever since. A very quiet item, of course, what with Ishka's somewhat controversial viewpoints, but an item nonetheless. Off Zek goes to get on with Grand Nagus stuff, leaving Quark to congratulate his mother and wonder how he can turn all of this to his advantage. It's good to see a relationship working, as Rom, the underappreciated brother, is about to bollocks up his. He wants Lita to sign the Ferengi equivalent of a prenuptial agreement, all those comments about him not being like most Ferengi having had the wrong impact. Naturally, she tells him to eat shit at the suggestion, so he calls off the wedding, then realizes what he's done after she's gone. It's dinner time in the Ishka household, and Quark's tolerating the third wheel treatment. It's all in aid of a good cause, namely him trying to convince Grand Nagus Zek to reverse the FCA ban so he can do business with Ferengi again. The good cause is scuppered when Zek tells him to balls. FCA business is FCA business, and while he could overrule it if he chose, Quark broke a contract with another Ferengi, and that's the only rule keeping this whole system running. How would anybody succeed at being a scumbag if the other party could just not go through with things once they realized they'd been scammed? If he wants his license back, Quark will have to deal with the FCA. It's handy, then, that he gets the chance. A distinctly teleporty noise from his wardrobe has him investigate and discover it now contains Brunt, the FCA dickbag who took his license. He's heard about Grand Nagus Zek becoming involved with the sort of female who thinks they should have rights, like being able to make profit or own things or wear clothes. Such ideas infecting the Grand Nagus are a serious threat to the entire Ferengi alliance, so he wants Quark to split them up before word gets out. Quark becomes 100% more patriotic about saving Ferengi society when Brunt says he'll also give Quark his license back as well. First stop then is seeing Grand Nagus Zek at work, which is pretty fucking ballsy for someone who's still banned from even being on this planet, but let's ignore that for now. Quark just called by to thank Zek for choosing to be with his mother, despite all of those vicious rumours. You know, the ones about overthrowing Ferengi patriarchy and giving females equal rights. Any other Grand Nagus might ask himself how such a woman would come to be the consort of the most powerful person in the entire Ferengi alliance, so Quark's delighted that Zek's not bothered by this, despite her being so devious that she managed to lead even the FCA on a merry chase. With those seeds of doubt planted, he returns to his mother for a bit of emotional blackmail with an unloaded weapon. This FCA ban is denying him his entire purpose in life, something made all the worse by having a mother who won't even ask her lover to lift a finger. Ishka relents and agrees to have a word, and Quark buggers off so as not to get caught in the blast radius. It can't be much worse than back on the station. Rom, the underappreciated brother, is in pieces about the marriage being off, though claims to be delighted through his tears. Lita does much the same to Kira, arguing this is the best outcome, before breaking down. The tears are now flowing back on FERENGI too, and Ishka is single. Broaching the topic of Quark's business license caused Zek to start claiming this was all part of her plot to bring down FERENGI society. She's distraught, but also concerned about him, going so far as to call it a disaster for everyone. That's not entirely true, as it's great news for Quark. He calls Brunt FCA and delivers an update, the result of which is Quark having his business license reinstated. He's still happy the following morning when he makes breakfast for his mother. She considers his busy work an indication of a troubled conscience, though attributes this to planning a return to DS9. Grand Nagus Zek himself puts pay to that idea by calling Quark and ordering him to the Tower of Commerce. Ishka's hopes that the meeting is about her are unfounded, as he wants Quark to be his new personal secretary. It's the opportunity of a lifetime, which obviously means it's a chance for the universe to take a big old shit on Quark again. Zek struggling to remember the password to access his timetable is just the start of the trouble, a theme that continues with him forgetting parts of the conversation he's currently having. It would appear the Grand Nagus is developing one or two memory problems. Rom, the underappreciated brother, has money problems. Not the lack of it in this case, but rather what he has getting in the way of his marriage to Lita. He thinks giving her half would mean she's able to sign the FERENGI prenup he wanted from her, but O'Brien points out that agreement included her not owning anything, so she'd have to give it back after signing. He does have an alternative suggestion, though. Rom finds Lita on the promenade sometime later and gives her the news. She doesn't have to sign anything now because he's got no profit to steal, him having donated his entire life savings to a Bajoran orphan charity. Learning that he's penniless cheers her right up, and they move on to mashing faces while O'Brien and Bashir watch, which is a bit weird now that I read that back. We'll leave them to their voyeurism and catch up with Quark. He's telling his mum about his new job, though she can already tell it's been a shit show due to how the stock markets are reacting. She's not particularly surprised given how forgetful she knows Zek has become, and expected it to play out this way now that she's not around. After all, she'd been helping him to run things for a while. That shocks Quark into spilling the beans about Brunt and his deal, one that disappoints his mother, though perhaps doesn't entirely surprise her. Brunt can't resist a little gloat when Quark's getting ready to start work the following day. There won't be any trading though, not after yesterday, and he says the FCA is going to be quizzing Zek on his decisions, after which there'll be no Zek and Brunt can take the job, just as he'd planned when he got Quark to remove his mother and make the whole thing possible. He'll even let Quark keep the license as a thank you for assisting his little coup d'etat. A lot of other FERENGI would have taken the offer and scarpered, but Quark is cursed with those complicated yet consistent morals of his. Zek was a lying, conniving bastard, but he was doing it all for more than just personal gain, and that's something Brunt will never be. Which is why Quark and Ishka plan to stop him. Zek is triumphant, every question battered away with aplomb, every apparent mistake revealed to be a master plan, and all while Brunt sat there and stewed. It's because of the advice Quark gave him before the meeting, and Zek admits as much while being honest about his memory issues, but Quark can't take the credit. Every piece of advice he gave came from his mother. This, along with an admission from Quark that the rumours were pure bullshit, is enough to get him fired and make Zek and Ishka a couple again. Now that everything's resolved, Quark's getting ready to return to DS9, not before Brunt can teleport into his wardrobe one final time and provide some vague threats. Zek and Ishka are prepared for him now, so an open attack won't work, and Zek is in Quark's debt, so revoking the license won't go down too well either, but Brunt promises to find another way to shit on his life before buggering off. Even vague threats aren't enough to spoil Quark's mood, so we'll leave him to consider who to try and swindle first with his shiny new business license, until the next adventure. An empire saved, a wrong-un served as just desserts, and Ishka's relationship with Zek repaired to boot. Plus, Quark's long winter of banishment from his own people is finally over, and Deep Space Nine's resident dodgy bastard can go back to his previous underhanded scheming. If you were here for the analysis from just 2 episodes ago in Business as Usual, one that examined the logic and motivations behind Quark, it's easy to extrapolate what an important change of fortunes this is for him, both literally and figuratively. A return of his business license isn't just the chance to broaden his financial horizons, it's also the freedom to play his particular flavor of the acquisition game against some of the most skilled opponents in the galaxy, other FERENGI. He'd said previously that he likes FERENGI and feels comfortable around them, an understandable enough sentiment, one linked to familiarity with a known quantity. He's fully versed in his own history and culture, even if he doesn't always agree with quite how ruthlessly others act, and that puts him on solid ground. It is perhaps more than that, though, not merely a social aspect, but a professional one, a desire to hone his craft by dealing with those who know all the old tricks and force him to come up with new ones. If that sounds familiar, it's because we regularly see such a relationship on the show already. Quark's frenemy association with Odo is due in no small part to his respect of Odo's skills, and by extension, the need for Quark to be increasingly inventive with his own deviousness. Odo forces Quark to be a better player, and that's something Quark values greatly. It's always about the game to him, so regaining access to some of the most skilled competitors he'll ever know is worth far more to him than just the latinum. You could argue that runs in the family. Ishka being so close to Grand Nagus Zek opens up massive opportunities for personal gain, ones that plenty of others would have exploited, but that's not why she's doing it. It's partly because she knows the Ferengi Alliance needs someone in charge who can look beyond their own wealth, and partly because she wants to prove she's every bit as much of a bastard as a man. We've seen this before, too. That desire to prove skill is why Ishka went against cultural taboos to earn profit previously in the Season 3 episode Family Business. It had little to do with the money itself, as Quark took care of her on that front, instead being largely for love of the game. If such things are inherited from parents, it makes you wonder if Grand Nagus Zek's mother was quite as traditional as Ferengi society at large would like to believe. Plot aside, we learned a few things about Ferengi society in this one. Perhaps most of interest is hearing that the FCA can call a meeting with the Grand Nagus and, if they consider him unfit for office, remove him. Despite him generally being treated like the money pope, that does make an element of sense. Ferengi worship markets, not men, and Zek's association with success would only last as long as he can make number go up, or in this case, have someone who do that on his behalf. Much like the real world, I suspect most Ferengi investors don't really care who actually makes the profit, as long as they've got someone to blame if it stops. It would not surprise me in the slightest to learn that Zek's little secret is known to far more people than just Brunt, and nobody has any intention of admitting they know about Ishka as long as that money keeps flowing. While we're talking about Ishka, I suppose we should end by addressing the change of performer. Our previous encounter with Ishka had her played by Andrea Martin, but she didn't return for this one. The official explanation at the time was her being unavailable, but an interview with Armin Shimmerman on the Season 5 DVD a few years afterwards stated that it was because she deeply disliked the significant prosthetics required by the role. Based on his description of the process and experience during that same interview, I can't say that I particularly blame her if this is the case. She's replaced here by Cecily Adams, whose take on the role, while perfectly fine in its own right, is sufficiently different to what came before that it's noticeable. It's not the first recasting we've had by a long shot, what with Zial now being on to her third performer, but it is perhaps the most obvious. In a show with so many prosthetic-clad characters, it can be easy to forget that there are actors underneath. Seeing how two different performers approach an exaggerated character gives us a clear example of just how much their input can drastically change the end result. End of episode.
Look, it were 2 years back, son. For dogs, that's like a lifetime. And I'm a space dog, so there's no telling what that is for me.
I know, but we need to perfectly recreate what you did in order for this to work.
Yeah, I understand, but do we really need to know what I drank in order to get the right type of piss?
We can't be sure what prompted the teleporter to put you inside a computer when you had your little oopsie. It may have been a chemical reaction based on something in your urine.
Alright, I get that one, but do you not think needing to get the same angular spray is going a bit far?
It's possible the imaging scanner could be reflected or refracted based on how it interacts with translucent surfaces.
Fine, I guess that makes some sort of sense, but level of turgidity, really?
Okay, you got me. That one was just for my own curiosity. Woof.